Happy Tuesday, post 4th of July holiday for those of us in the US of A, and of course, those of us who had the holiday off. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Since it is now July, I thought now would be as good a time as any to have our monthly Hexcrawl Q&A chat, whatever. Hey, Gashrin, thanks for joining in. I don't have a particular agenda. I do have a couple articles that I have queued up, both from Dice Goblin blog. I thought we could start there and then see what develops. And they're both hex crawling sandbox adjacent, so I thought they might be cool to look at. And then, of course, if you have questions, comments, topics, shoot them over my way so we can chat about them. I'm going to switch over to the view here. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Bam, bam, bam. All right. So a couple of these I had found. I didn't mean for them both to be on this Dice Goblin blog, but the Dice Goblin blog putting out some good stuff. So there it is. Kudos to Dice Goblin, whoever they may be. One thing I know, especially zoomed in, like, do we need the giant banner, Dice Goblin? I get it, Dice Goblin, nice map back here, everything, but that takes up a massive amount of space. So this first one we'll look at is called Intelligence, Influence, and Might, Simple Faction Conflict in Tabletop Role-Playing Games. And of course, factions are important in sandbox play, and which involve with hex crawling if you're getting into that open world whatnot. I haven't pre-read this. It just seemed interesting. I think I found it. I want to say I found both of these separately on Reddit. When was this posted? Is there a date? No date here. This is posted by Lars. I like the idea of faction play, but I find it often gets bogged down into a large number of variables and actions. I've tried to make a system that is trackable with simple tokens representing assets and allows for plenty of player intervention. So we get, looks like a table of contents here. We get factions and regions. All right, I'm not going to read through table of contents, which we'll skip since we're going to read the whole thing. First up, factions and regions. Determine the number of factions at play and determine the number of distinctive regions. For each faction, you will track its resources and assets. Why was assets bolded but resources not bolded? Probably a mistake. Then we also have regions. Resources are generated each turn by regions under the faction's control. Each region has a resource value, the number of resources generated by this region. Assign a value of 0 to 3 for each region. And then what these numbers mean is 0 is barren wastes or wilderness, 1 sparsely populated, recently settled, 2 dotted with settlements, healthy agriculture, 3 lush fields, overflowing mines, bustling trade routes. So I think in this case, when he's talking about a barren waste, wilderness, it's unsettled. There's nobody there. They may claim some whatever, the forest is mine, but there's nobody settled there, so there's nobody chopping down the trees or doing whatever, right, to generate resources from it. So essentially it's empty of, I guess, assets or things to workers to pull those resources out of the wilds. Each region is connected to neighboring regions unless blocked by natural hazards such as mountain ranges. Okay, that seems pretty self-explanatory. In terms of asset types, breaking down to the 3, one is called influence, which is political clout and power. The second is intelligence, spies and informants, and the third is might, which means military forces. Each faction will try to amass its assets in vital regions to gain control of its resources and expand its domain. If a faction has no assets of a type in a region and holds no control in that field, asset score is 0. If a faction has 1 asset of a type in a region, it has a weak presence, asset score is 5. If a faction has 2 assets of a type in a region, it has a capable presence with an asset score of 10. And then if a faction has 3 assets of a type in a region, it has a strong presence with an asset score of 15. A faction cannot have more than 3 assets of the same type in a region. So it seems like these assets, we're not counting them individually. So let's see an example we'll say that Saruman has deployed that weird half orc guy, I forget his name, to Bree. That would be intelligence. We would say that that weird half orc guy in Bree is an intelligence asset. Therefore, now Saruman has a weak presence in Bree, asset score 5, I guess. I think the thing is we'll have to see is we don't know. It's some of these situations. I think when we're going through all these, it would. I don't know if it's just me. I think it would be helpful sometimes to see what the final equation is going to be, so that these things make sense. Because I kind of wonder why not just do it 1, 2, and 3. Why do 5, 10, 15? But I'm guessing there's going to be a 20-sided die roll or something similar, maybe even a 100-sided die roll, and so we want bigger numbers. So we want to track small numbers, and then we have to transform them to bigger numbers. I'm not sure. I guess we'll see. We don't know what any of these numbers mean, but I'm guessing that if Saruman had 3 half orc guys, sending them all to Bree doesn't. You don't add together more. You don't get an asset type of strong because you can only have one asset of a type. And we'll just have to see how that plays out. A faction cannot have more. Okay, we already got that. Here's an example. The League of Free Houses has 2 intelligence assets, right? Intelligence? No, influence. No, it is intelligence. 2 intelligence assets, 1 influence, and 1 might. MGT? Okay. In the Great Woods. This means they have a capable intelligence network, a weak influence, and a weak military presence. Wait a minute. Oh, cannot have more than 3 assets at the same time. I'm sorry. My mistake. So technically, Saruman could have 3 half-orc guys, giving him 3 intelligence in Bree, but no more than that. Kind of be nice to know what those numbers mean, because you get in that situation where the gaminess kind of affects the fiction aspect. Because in a town like Bree, I could see how one half orc guy hanging around in Bree is equivalent to 1 intelligence asset in terms of weak presence. But I would say in Gondor, or what I would say in Minas Tirith and Gondor, so a big city, one half orc guy, I would say is no intelligence at all. In a small town in Bree, you could put a guy, have him hang around the town square, go into a couple of taverns, get all the news and wants, and be sort of in the middle of things. That same person doesn't equate to anything in a massive city with lots of different areas of control and lots of different spaces to be. They can't be in all that places at once, and hanging around in one tavern in Minas Tirith is not going to get you the same breadth of everything that's going on in Minas Tirith than a guy in Bree. So I don't know if these are meant to scale, that maybe in a big city you need to send more to have 1 asset equivalence. I don't know. We'll see. Or maybe we just hand wave it away. But in any case, back to the example. The League of Free Houses has 2 intelligence, 1 influence, and 1 might asset in the Greenwoods. This means they have a capable intelligence network, a weak influence, and a weak military presence. If the League wants to know what their enemy is up to, they need to roll a d20 equal or under 10 at the start of their turn. 2 assets, asset score of 10. All right, I think that's where that's coming from. Now, you can only get up to 15. I guess I'm guessing that they're dead set on using a d20, because I think you could just go 1, 2, 3. Though I suppose the odds don't work quite as well, because if you had a score of 2, they want 2 assets to basically be a smidge, maybe more or less than basically about 50%. So the average of a d6 is 10 point, or average of a d20 is 10.5. So technically, if you have to roll equal or under 10, it's a smidge less than 50%. But basically, let's call it 50% with 2 assets. Whereas if it was you're doing 1, 2, 3 on a 6-sided die, you'd need 3 assets to get 50%. Gastron says, yeah, it's probably scalable. 1 spike was weak, 10 equals average, 100 equals strong. Otherwise, no faction would ever invest more than 3 agents in one area. Yeah, you may need to scale like what an asset means in terms of a region. I don't know, but it also then gets complicated, And I think they're trying to keep it simple. So I guess in their mind, maybe it's the same. But that's where I'd want to figure things out. It may not even ever come up, but it also might be like, well, I send the guy in the city. Great, we have one intelligence asset. And I'm thinking, well, where's this one guy hanging out? Because they can't be, for example, in a, I don't know, your sort of fantasy medieval city where there's the powers of the religious order, and then there's the powers of the secular order, and then there's the underground and or the underworld and all this stuff. And like you can't send one guy and expect them to have influence, get the whole city just one influence or whatever over everything. Is you would expect that you'd need to send in at least a handful, 100 of guys, 20 something, maybe to try to get a few in everywhere. But we'll just take it as it stands for right now. I am probably overcomplicating things, as is my want. The home region. Each faction has a home region. This region starts with a strong influence for that respective faction. Alternatively, having strong influence in a region is the entry barrier to domain play. Okay, I think what they mean here is that you could use this as a means to an end. If you want to, if you're looking for a way to transition your party to domain play, or your party asks, hey, how can we take control of this region? Well, you do that by having strong influence in that region, which means you have to build up those three things. Though we don't know in the fiction how you would build up that stuff. Maybe the might would be the most straightforward one. You just hire a bunch of mercs and sit them in that region, and then you will maybe make some roll and then control it. A faction loses if it loses all influence in its home region, or if an enemy has a strong might in the faction's home region, and the faction has no might to oppose it. So we haven't seen yet how to run opposition, and they may not be doing this. This isn't a super long thing, so some of the stuff might just be left to us for the moment. For example, what do you do when you have competing might? If you have 3 might in a region, I have 1 might in a region, do we have to battle? Can we kind of coexist? Maybe if we're within 1, we can't, but I don't know. Maybe again, we probably have to figure that. And of course, the other part is then what is unless we're going to have the players deal just in these kinds of these very broad, abstracted out things. I'm going to send in 2 might. I'm going to send in 1 might, right? Instead, if they're getting like, I have 100 mercenaries, is that enough to be a might, or is that 0 might, or is it all relative? We don't know. Creating a realm. To create a realm to play in summary, you designate factions, you designate regions and their resources, you designate the home region of each faction, and then you determine which regions would logically already fall under each faction and the presence they would have there. It may not always be logical, but there you go. And I think you could see some of this. I don't know if they read some of the birthright stuff, but this is basically the kind of birthright sort of system. Though the birthright, and you can go back and check out my read on the birthright from 2nd edition if you missed that. But they do something similar where you're setting up regions. They get more granular, and it's definitely not nearly as abstract where they talk about building. And I think they use some different resources, but essentially you're investing in these areas, you control these areas, and then you spread out and you try to maintain your area, potentially conquer other areas, blah blah blah, all that fun stuff. This is definitely simpler, but there is that translation stuff that comes up with if your party, and I like to keep I guess for myself, I really like it when my players stay in the fiction as much as possible and not the mechanical part. So I like that if they are dealing with might, I would prefer that stuff just stays behind the screen and they're dealing with how many men they could do, and then I could make some kind of, hey, 0 to 100 men is weak, 100 to 500 is moderate, and more than 500 is strong, something of that nature. Or maybe I'd say at that 1,000 plus is strong. Whatever makes sense, and you can inflate or deflate those numbers as you see fit in your world for whatever makes sense. And that way my players can just deal with those mercenaries. I can then roll dice if I say that, if I want to say just behind the screen for my accounting that the orcs have moderate might, and then the party finally gets into it and they scout the orcs, instead of me saying the orcs have moderate might, I can give them a rough head count of, oh yeah, it seems like between 500 and 1,000 orc. Or I might say, oh, it looks like you've got 500 to 600 orc infantry looks like between 100 and 200 orc cavalry, and then 50 to 100 heavy orc guards, something like that. And then for stuff that requires, or I want to have those hard numbers, I have them. And then when I'm just doing this kind of stuff, I can also just use these more abstract numbers. Assets and their function. Intelligence. Briefing. Each turn you can roll 1d20 under or equal to your intelligence asset score to learn the current enemy's assets in a neighboring region. Intelligence can be used to attack enemy intelligence. And then you have counterintelligence, spies and informants trying to hinder, sabotage, or eliminate enemy agents. And then attack enemy influence, blackmail, false information, and assassination. Having any intelligence assets in a region reveals the enemy's assets. Having a higher intelligence than your opponent gives advantage on any might clashes. So this is cool. So if you have some intelligence assets, you can do intelligence activities and counterintelligence. Spies and informers trying to hinder, sabotage, or eliminate each other. You can attack enemy influence. I think the interesting thing with the attacking enemy influence is if influence is based on a sum total of these parts, when you say you're attacking an enemy influence, are you eliminating some of those parts, which would seem to be just attacking enemy intelligence, or are you able to, or is it a temporary modifier that for whatever period of time you have this, but there's that core influence doesn't change. It's just you're modifying it up and down. I think I prefer that in terms of this one. This one seems clear that you were removing their intelligence from the field. Does that sound right to folks? It kind of sounds right to me. Next, we have influence. Allocation. Each turn you can roll a d20 under or equal to your influence asset score to gain double resources from this region this turn. Influence can be used to attack enemy influence, attack enemy might, having a higher influence than your opponent to be granted the region's resources on your turn. Do I have that right? Does influence the sum or is it not the sum? Hold on a minute. I might have had that confused. No, influence, okay, it's political clout and power. So if you are, so you can attack. But it's still based on this other number. That's interesting. I still probably would have this as being intelligence. I kind of like, it seems like they're setting up sort of a rock, paper, scissors. With intelligence, you can attack influence. With influence, you can attack might, and might, I guess, only attacks other might. Though I feel like might could also attack influence. It's hard to ignore the people that got a whole bunch of troops right there, so I would probably add that in. Then under might, you can plunder. And then you can plunder +1 resources from this region. If this succeeds, you do lose 1d4 influence. So you want to use your might carefully. You can also attack enemy might. Having a higher might in a region hinders the enemy's ability to reinforce unless they're moving at least 2 management assets into the region in one turn. They cannot send 2 might assets into the region in one turn. They cannot send management reinforcements. Having the only might in a region means that you can requisition any resources found. I would say that they have to move. Maybe they have to have at least, I don't say at least 2. Maybe they have to have no more than 1 less than you do. So if you have 1 might, you can't stop another power from bringing in 1 might. If you have 2 might, I suppose it still wouldn't matter, right? If you have 2 might, then they could still just move in 1 or 2. But if you have 3 might, they have to move in 2. I don't know. I might want to fiddle around with that. I'm not. This is kind of cool, but I guess it just puts the if you want to have at least, if as soon as you have 1 might in there, you've forced someone to have to bring in at least double your 1 to come in, which is, I guess maybe it's I don't know if that would lead to more defensively, since you can't. I don't know. It would be interesting to see in play if the idea that I can invest whatever it is to let's say generate 1 might. If I throw 1 might in a region, suddenly you have to generate double what I did, and not equivalent, which is interesting. it opens up. I kind of looking at it like in a board game, like, ooh, if I can put this here first, then now you have to do something kind of double as much. You have to spend double the resources that I do to try to get in there. Not sure whether it's good or bad, but it is. Okay, here we go. Asset attacks. To attack the opposition's assets in a region, both sides roll 1d20. The goal is to roll under or equal to your asset score while rolling higher than the opponent. If the winner rolls under their asset score and the loser rolls above their asset score, the loser loses 2 assets. If the winner and loser both roll under their asset score, but the winner rolls higher, the loser loses 1 asset. If both sides roll above their asset score, no assets are lost. Frederick Rohr, K. Frederick says, urban and space crawls are very different and yet the same. I imagine they do, because, yeah, I can see how those would work the same. Might be pretty similar. I mean, this system doesn't really require urban, space, or what would it be? Suburban, wilderness, fields, fiefdoms, kingdoms. So it doesn't really. You could easily, I think, just give this a fresh coat of paint for sci-fi and turn it into moving space forces around. If you were playing a sci-fi game. And you could definitely, if you wanted to zoom in to control of a single city, you could easily have areas of this. You could easily use the same thing and just you're zooming in. So instead of regions of a landscape, regions of land, it's city parts. You know, all these different neighborhoods, and then you can run the same thing in there. Asset costs. Purchase can be made at the start of your turn in your home region. Generating 1 asset costs 1 resource. Informants and spies, such as bartenders, information brokers, and bribed officials. Generating 1 influence asset costs 2 resources. Diplomats and public speakers, such as bards, town criers, and pamphleteers. And then generating 1 might asset costs 3 resources, which are militia and military troops. And of course, when you're looking at this, while there's what's the word it look like? So depending on how detailed you're going to get to in the workings of this, some of this you're going to want to detail a little bit more, because if you're going to be getting into wars and battles, militia and military troops are not equivalent. You definitely would prefer military troops to militia. And if I was playing the game as a player and we're playing with this system player facing, and I say, okay, I want to generate 1 might, I'm going to say, and I want them to be military. If it's my choice between militia and military troops, I'm going to want military troops, because if we are going to run some kind of war gamey or war simulation, big battle simulation, which we're going to read about after this one, if no other questions or comments come up, I want those. I would prefer not to just have militia. And probably the same thing. Spies are more valuable than informants, and diplomats are more valuable than public speakers. So I think I would want to have some way of figuring these out, cutting them up a little bit more. Procedure of play. 1, you're going to generate your resource income from regions where you have the highest influence of those present. And then you roll for briefing, allocation, and plunder where applicable. So you would do all 3 of them. I almost think it would be that you have to maybe choose one to do. Add a little choice in there, add a little decision point, so that you don't get everything. You got to pick what you want most of. Then you get to purchase new assets in your home region. You get to move any number of assets to any neighboring regions. Note that having a lower might hinders reinforcements, which I think we saw above. You could then perform any number of asset attacks. I think I might like to limit that and say, no, you got to pick, and then roll any intelligence attacks first and influence them might. And you could maybe tie those into your. I'd have to play around with it, because on the one hand, I like having to make choices, and I don't so much want somebody to be able to just monopolize everybody and say, oh, I'm going to make like 500 different things because I can. And that might, and I wouldn't want, and I'm not sure, I guess I would want, if you're a powerful power, that you get to basically just push your weight around. I mean, you're going to get to push your weight around in a bunch of things anyway, because you're going to have all these assets, but then also in terms of your actions. But that's a flavor of the game. That's the kind of I want that sort of feeling to come across, that yeah, you are powerful. So yeah, you do get to, not only in terms of the number and quality of your assets to be kind of push your weight around, but also in terms of the number of actions you get to do, because you have so many arms, you just get to reach everywhere. But I would probably then want to either tie it and just say, no, you're going to get one, choose one, and put that thought out there, like, oh my gosh, I've got 4 seasons, and I know that something's happening in the spring, next spring, and we're in the summer, so I know I've got a summer, for example, summer action, winter action. Okay, I got a couple things I want to do. What's more important? Is it getting more assets? Is it doing the getting more resources? Is it doing this? I want to have some of that. I want to have some of those points to make those decisions maybe more difficult. Do I get more resources and hope that I can do something down the line, or do I do this now and then hope that this other thing's not going to bite me in the butt because I didn't do it? That kind of thing. Of course, here's the note that we've just been talking about. Note that a lot can happen in a round. I'd set around to roughly 1 month of in-game time, probably. Player intervention. Any player/party action can influence the main asset types. An assassination of a military leader might lower might. Rallying people in the town square might raise influence. Intercepting an important letter might raise intelligence. Looting a valuable treasure might give +1 resources. Furthermore, having dominance in might could lead to a final siege of the main city or fortress in a region. And they haven't talked about how things like that, it's a good note, but one of the things is we don't know yet. Okay, if there is a city in that region, certainly if there's a fortress in that region, how does it affect might? We don't know. So it's good. I think I like this. I think there's a lot of neat ideas in there. It's stuff that I've seen in different forms, but I kind of like what they're doing. Maybe just because the way I'm thinking is I'm looking for those other details. Ooh, so what if I have a fortress in here? Because part of the whole thing, right, with domain plays, I'm gonna build my tower. I'm gonna build a fortress. I'm gonna build the watchtower of Amun-Sul. Well, how does that affect might? How does that affect these things? And the one thing I'm not quite sure of, okay, so you assassinate a military leader and that lowers might. That sort of implies that might, I guess it's, well, what is might in terms of, again, that, okay, on an abstract level, it's just this unit. And then in play, that unit of might was just one guy. Some other unit of might be 1,000 men. How do you put all that together? It's interesting. And then, of course, is it a permanent thing or a temporary thing? Because I would say maybe some of these are temporary. Sure, because you assassinated that military leader and they were a good leader and they were organized, you assassinated them. Now they're thrown into some confusion, but that doesn't last forever. To me, that's not a permanent loss. You get a new leader up in there. Maybe they could roll every month to kind of get that one back. Something like that. I don't know. Whatever we decide. There's, like I said, I really like the framework in here. I maybe wouldn't mind if there's a bit more to it, but this is one of those where I feel like, how does this person envision this playing it? One of those, give me a good example of play where I can see that, okay, here are the turns, here are the things mean, here are the players interacting with them. Are we meant for everyone to just, hey, here's the system and I just play this out to everybody, or is it meant for me kind of behind the scenes sort of manage things? What's the intention? Hey, Bob Mostel. Bob Mostel says you can make troops be the might and leaders be a die roll modifier. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Yep. Lots of good stuff in here. So this was intelligence, influence, and might. Some simple faction conflict in tabletop role playing. I just noticed I forgot to put the link in the chat, so let me do that just so in case I know you could find it in my thing, but there it is. What did I hit a button? What did I do over there? No. Thank you, Windows. There we go. So that's the link to the article. Bob Muzzle also says, yeah, I'm having strong deja vu relative to Birthright, Worlds Without Number, and Adventure Conquer of King, all of which are more structured and detailed. Yep. I think, I'm there with you. There with you, Bob Mostel. I think this might help people who look at those and get, because look, of course, there seem to be different movements in a lot of these games, right? It's particularly in OSR space. There's people wanting a lot of bang for the amount of detail, right? So I'm going to have how much can I get out of how little? And I think for some games, just something like this will work very well. I'm just going to have these kind of very abstract resources, move them around. It does have, in that way, it kind of has a very board game, sort of a board game vibe to it. If you played like a worker placement kind of game, you played board games that have worker placement in it. In essentially those kind of board games, you have a number of workers, you put them out on the board. Sometimes you can get more, and you basically invest them in certain areas, and they generally let you do stuff. And this feels like that worker placement. Oh, this many of this kind of worker, this many of this kind of worker, this many of this other kind of worker, and I can move them around, and then I can get more, and I move them. And then at some points when I come into conflict with other workers that have been placed on the board, we roll some dice, we see what happens, something like that. Oh, he also mentions Kingdoms and Warfare. Yeah, I have yet to read Kingdoms and Warfare. So in that way, it has that kind of board game sort of vibe to it. I don't know if that's what the intention is by Lars over at Dice Goblin, if they mean it to just be a wide open system, and that's how players are going to interface with it. Is you're just going to give them some tokens and put them on the board, or if it's meant to be more to help the GM behind the scenes do it, and then the players are getting talking in kind of numbers and people. These things I prefer that just because I want people to stay within the story and not talk about I want to eliminate one management asset. No, I want them to talk about killing the evil general. And in that way, knowing what some of these knowing what how that's supposed to work in terms of if all these things equal to one resource, like I was saying at the beginning, if I send one guy to Bree and that's equivalent to an intelligence asset. But if I send one guy to Minas Tirith, I don't think that would count as an intelligence asset. So how can we do that? And I think you can even see in there, I could see adding some additional maths and things. You could make it work. We just hasn't been done yet. So this is another one that I thought was interesting. I've done some, I did at least a couple things on Barbarians and Lemuria before. I'm going to throw this in the chat. Still at the Dice Goblin blog. Covering up my face. There we go. This one's called Mass Combat, Expanding the Army Rating System from Barbarians of Lemuria. I might have to go back and look at this in particular. When we looked at Barbarians of Lemuria last time, I was looking at I was getting into looking at the class features, the careers that they have, and I think I might have gone also onto their magic system, which I like a lot. But I don't even remember the army rating system. So we might have to go back and look at that source, also posted by Lars. My drafts are filled with posts about mass combat systems. There are various ideas I really like, such as infantry to cavalry to archery, counter, triangle, moving troops into the odd war bands, etc., but I can't really get them to stick together in a way that I liked. That's when I gave the army rating system from Barbarians of Lemuria by Simon Washburn another look. And let's scroll down. And then they made a worksheet, which I'm not going to grab now, but it's go to the blog and you can see their worksheet. It provides all the feeling I'm looking for. It takes a bunch of variables into account without bogging it down in a load of mechanics. I love me some wargaming, but to introduce it to my campaigns unannounced is a bit of a risk. This post is my love letter and expansion to the basics introduced in Barbarians of Lemuria, and I hope it can provide you with some inspiration. I might convince you to check out the full game. The base system uses the following variables: army training, army size, battlefield, supplies/equipment, sorcerer, and commander. The neat part is it asks you only to look at the differences between armies. That makes the system so easily scalable. It works just as well for a 30 versus 30 skirmish as an epic 100,000 versus 100,000 era-defining apocalyptical struggle. Then we have a table of contents. All right, expanding on a solid base. I want to make the system a bit more simple to use and provide a few more handles for the GM to narrate/integrate it into their setting. Note that I'm using all of this through a Google spreadsheet, which can be found here. Okay. Keeping track of the army rating of both sides. Keeping track only of the bonuses. Okay, I think they know it. I mean, keeping track only of the bonuses. If side B is larger, it gains a plus X bonus. Side A does not get a negative score, simply not the bonus. I made the following additions. Army size. I like knowing the number of troops roughly involved. I added squads for 8 men, platoons 32 men, companies 128 men, battalions 512 men. Note that it's still about the difference in troops. I apply the following bonuses: larger army, +1 army rating, 25% larger, +2 army rating, twice as big or bigger, +4 army rating. And then army training. They classify 4 levels. Green, these are rabble, militia, 1 hit die per troop. Trained, regular soldiers, 2 hit die per troop. Veteran, survivors of multiple battles, 5 hit die per troop. And then elite, the best of the best, 8 hit die per troop. Generalizes for a size, an average if necessary. If a size has mostly green troops and some veteran, you could average it as green or trained. I use the hit dice to have a frame of reference and to make comparison easier. Better trained, +1 army rating. Better trained and a difference of 3 hit dice or higher, +2 army rating. Trained versus veteran is 2 hit dice versus 5 hit dice, a difference of 3, so +2. Supplies and equipment. I split these into 2 variables. Supplies and equipment each have 3 values. So supplies can be either cut off, limited, or fully stocked. Equipment can be low quality, normal quality, or high quality. Simply assign a value for both variables. If a side has a higher value, it gains +1 army rating. The rebellion the rebellion has low quality weapons, but has managed to ambush Imperial troops and has cut off their supply lines. Supplies, the rebellion has 3, they're fully stocked. The Empire is 1, cut off. That's +1 army rating to the rebellion. Equipment, the rebellion is 1, low quality. The Empire is 2, normal quality, equals a +1 army rating to the Empire. And then magic. They rank the usage of magic or high tech for sci-fi settings in 3 tiers: none, some, or prominent. I simply give scores to each and apply the differences as army rating: none 1, some 2, prominent 4. An army making prominent use of magic going up against an army that has no magic gains an army rating of 3, which is 4 - 1. Battlefield position. I rank the following battlefield positions. Note, once again, this is about differences between sides. If both sides are fighting from a terrible position, it does not affect the outcome. Just as with magic, I simply compare the 2 scores and grant the difference in army rating. You have terrible, no cover, uneven or even dangerous ground, swamp, toxic fumes, lava, a shoreline, the score is 0. Normal, plains or rolling hills, the score is 1. Excellent, forest, landscape with lots of natural cover, a fortified position for a score of 2. And then overwhelming, a heavily fortified position, ancient city walls, score a 4. The Empire is attacking a rebel-held city from their staging ground in the plains. That's normal, 1 versus overwhelming, 4. That's a +3 army rating for the rebellion. And then commander. I like the idea of the person in charge being important for the whole chain of command and outcome of the battle. It allows to make battles more personal and provides a great weakness. Take out the commander! I don't want it to count as heavy as training / hit dice, so I apply scores and once again grant the difference in army rating. So you have green, trained, veteran, or elite, 0, 1, 2, 4 in terms of army rating. And then various morale bonuses. If a side fights in their homeland, they gain +1. Count the months the troops on each side have been away from home and on deployment. Compare the values, grant the difference in months as army rating to the side who has a shorter deployment. And then you sum it all together, add all the bonuses together for both sides. With the nifty worksheet, it looks like something like this. And there's a picture, 2 sides. So what I like about this is you're definitely ending up with, even though the math might give you a bunch of larger numbers, but you're going to end up with fairly small numbers. So they start off with putting the size of the armies. So side A has 5 squads, 5 platoons, 3 companies, and 2 battalions for a total of 1,608 personnel. Side B has 6 squads, 2 platoons, no companies, and 2 battalions for a total of 1,136 personnel. That grants side A size bonus of 2. The training of side A is green. Side B, they are veterans. So side B gets a training bonus of 2. Side A gets zilch. Supply, side A is limited. B is cut off, which gives side A 1 supply bonus. Side B gets zilch. Side A has normal quality equipment. Side B has high quality equipment. So the side B gets an equipment bonus of 1. Magic presence, side A has none. Side B has some. So side B gets a magic bonus of 2. They're both normal, so there's no battlefield bonus. And then side A has a trained commander, but side B has a veteran commander. So side B gets a commander bonus of 1. And then side A is fighting in their homeland. Side B has been deployed slightly longer, so side A gets a deployment bonus of 1. And then you add it all together, and you only end up with, essentially, even though you're adding a bunch of stuff together, at the end, it's just side A has a total army score of 5, and then side B has a total army score of 6. And now we get to the battle round. A battle round can last a few hours, a day, a week, or even a month in the case of big battles. In each battle round, the player's side rolls the battle roll. The battle roll is you're going to roll 2d6 plus the army rating minus the enemy army rating. After the roll, subtract 7. This is the change in victory points. The battle is won at 10 victory points and lost at minus 10 victory points. Using the example above, the player's side rolls 2d6, they get a 10. They add 5, they subtract 6, they get 9. They subtract 7 to get 2. This battle round went in favor of the players. Side A now has 2 victory points. We have a box text here. The original system does not necessarily account for that dynamic changing of army rating while the fight is going on. These new rules would make that a lot harder with more things to track, except the worksheet allows you to make changes on the fly. You might decide that a roll of 2 victory points results in, say, 2 platoons being wiped out, and the enemy is running out of high-quality equipment. Simply change those fields, and the army rating is adjusted automatically. Player interaction and intervention. Barbarians of Lemuria proposes that player interaction takes place primarily through heroic actions. Furthermore, regardless of who wins or loses, the players survive the battle. I'd say that not simply narrating that, quote, I'd say that not simply narrating that, all right, that's maybe a little bit not exactly rolls off the tongue, but let's try that again. I'd say that not simply narrating that your army is wiped out and you are killed by endless waves of enemies is good practice, but players can still die in combat encounters related to the battle. Heroic actions generally grant between 1 and 3 victory points. I'd also keep an eye open for ways that heroic actions can change the base army rating of either side. Some examples: bring reinforcements, can grant victory points or might add more troops to your tally/size bonus. Capture or kill victory points or might lower the enemy's commander bonus. Destroy can grant a flat bonus or might change the battlefield significantly enough to change the battlefield bonus. Hold or take position. Inspire or prevent sorcery. Prevent that sorcery! Stop that ritual! Optional rules. There are some additions. Haven't thoroughly playtested tested these, but I feel like they might add something to the basic framework. Strategy and tactics. Okay, you're basically making an intelligence check to get an edge. I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably want them to actually explain their tactics. Or roll, have everyone write down on a piece of paper the opposing sides. And of course, if I'm playing one side, the player's playing the other one, I could write down something. The players might write down something, and then you see how they interact, kind of diplomacy style. And then, of course, you still want to have to figure out what those means in terms of modifiers. In some cases, it might be obvious. Other cases, it might take more finagling. Rallying speech. Okay, these are just basically making checks. Yeah, I'm not that fond of just making a check, but there was that. And then assault, defend, maneuver. I love me some rock, paper, scissors. At the start of a battle round, both sides pick either assault, defend, or maneuver. Defend beats assault, assault beats maneuver, maneuver beats defend. If you win, gain a victory point. If you lose, -1 victory point. Tie is 0. Well, there you have it. All right. So there's, again, more really good ideas. I'm going to need to go back to the Barbarians of Lemuria to look at that. I wonder, I don't think I have it on my, I could try to go there right now. Nobody's giving me any questions, so I don't have anything to say to anybody about anything. So I'm free to talk about what I want to talk about. Anybody got anything? So I thought both these good articles from the Dice Goblin blog. If you missed it, we looked at, we just finished looking at their mass combat rules that they're modifying from Barbarians of Lemuria, and then we also looked at intelligence and influence and might, which is a faction conflict. I think one thing is I think they could go back to it, or you could go back, because I think I like some of the things they're doing in the mass combat one in terms of the relativity of numbers. I really think they could go back, and because I think this article is first, and tweak this a little bit to, one, you bring them both in, use the same kind of dice rolling for both mechanics, and I like that relativity, and I'd want the relativity to have effect here, which I think is part of what I was finding a little bit of issue with. That kind of like send one guy to a small town, that's one asset, but then send them to a big city, there's still one asset. And it might be better if you looked at and say, okay, well, if you're going into settlements of bigger sizes or regions of more, whatever, you need to send more. It's that relativity thing. Yeah, sure. In a small town like Bree, one guy's fine. If you're sending them to Minas Tirith, you're going to need 50 men. That kind of thing. All right, I'm doing a search. See if I can find more Barbarians of Lemuria PDF. You know what? I think it's actually not called. I think they're using some other. Let's see if I can find it really quick. If I can't, then I can't. Let's see. And here's my. I haven't added to in a while. Any other questions? I haven't seen any questions come up. I don't think I missed anything in the chat. Let me know. Anything's going on. I do really like these boards. I must say. This is Ouija. I think it's pronounced Ouija. Ouija.io. And I've talked about this before. I got on one of those lifetime deals, but I think that the free deal gives you I don't know if it's unlimited boards, but I think it's pretty flexible if you want to try it out and not have to spend any money, especially if you're just using it for yourself. I believe the free version is pretty well set. Oh, Gashrin with a question. Awesome. Yes, please. Gashrin, do not worry about the length. As you can see, time is on your side. All right, let's see. How does the hexcrawling look from a player's perspective? I.e., the GM prepared a nice hex map, put all the details, layers, points of interest, etc. But how does that look from the group POV? That's a good question. I think this comes up actually quite a bit, Gashrin. And I think people have asked it before, but that's not a problem. I don't mind talking about it again. It's going to be very table style dependent. There are some folks out there who will put the hex map in front of their players with a certain amount of information on it, potentially. I think sometimes I think back in the day, right? The original here's the outdoor. I don't have it in front of me. Here's outdoor survival. Here's the map. Bam, you're on the map, and the players could basically survey the entire outdoor survival map. If you don't know, outdoor survival was an Avalon Hill board game about surviving in some wilderness. Had this kind of crazy sort of map. Crazy map. That one was about hunting and doing anything, but what they did was they took that map and they took the symbology on the map. Because I think you had symbols for what campsites and where you could find game, and they just kind of retooled them to equal settlements and things like that. So they took that map and they just plunked you down and said, okay, you're here, and you could see the whole map. And they didn't, there was no fog of war. They weren't trying to cover up the map to show anything. Just let you have it. Here's the map. You might not know what everything means, or you might see a settlement out there and not know what kind of settlement it is, because it could be a fighter's fortress or a clerical abbey, monastery type. They're just a cleric's castle, or it could be a magic tower. I don't remember if you got to see how granular it is, but you can move around. Now, with a lot of the digital resources we have, a lot of folks will make a player-facing hex map and then have a GM hex map, and then maybe on the players-facing hex map, as they discover opportunities, and maybe you seed the map with a few things that are well known or have been observed by default, and the players discover stuff and fill things in as they go, but still the players basically have the hex map. They're moving around that hex map. Now, on top of it, some folks will add in fog of war, where they'll give some view of the hex map and then show more of it as the players explore or not. Now, I don't do any of that. The third approach is you have the hex map on the GM side. The players can make whatever map they want, but I just give it to them, basically theater of the mind. And sometimes I will allow, and I think it's a good tool to give some kind of partial map to the players. I gave them one in my current campaign. I think in the campaign I ran before this, I had them basically their first adventure, the part of the prize or their fee or whatever that they got for completing the adventure was that they got a map. But the maps I were giving out were not to scale. They don't have hexes on them. None of that. They are in fiction partial maps of the general area, just so they can kind of get an idea of what's going on. And then you could put some little tidbits. On one map I had, it was kind of a surveyor's map that somebody had pieced together from multiple sources, some of it oral traditions and asking people about stuff, other things, some of it's from observations, and so it would have things with a question mark. Oh, This was called like the Cave of Thieves question mark. City maybe, and these things are just kind of, they were basically almost like a little bit of a rumor table on the map so that the players could look at that and decide, oh, Cave of Thieves. Ooh, that sounds interesting. The thieves have treasure. There might be treasure in those caves. Let's check it out. Or, ooh, I want to check out. It looks like a ruins of a city over there. Do you say? Ooh, I want to do that. So there's really no wrong way to do it. People are going to take all kinds of different approaches. I have found, and just from observations of people talking about it, when you put your hexes and you make it player facing, some issues that people come up with is the fact that on a hex, and here I can actually use this one map here. So if you're looking at this map, and I forget where I got this from. I think somebody just posted this on Twitter, or not Twitter. Might have been on Reddit or somewhere, and I just grabbed it because it was a good kind of general map. If you have your players and they're on the hex map and they're seeing everything, some problems come up. Or not problems, but some things that can kind of hurt your brain depending on how you want to think about it. You're in the city of, and I'm just going to zoom in here. You're in the city of Dorlo. You want to go do north. Easy. Bam. You go from 20.12, 20.11. Awesome. Okay. No. We changed our mind. We want to go see the farmlands and the river to the south of Dorlo in 2013. Great. Bam, 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 bam. All right. Perfect. We can go north. We can go south. Well, what happens if we can go east or west? Well, you can't. You have to kind of veer north or you have to veer south. If we're sticking to having to be in a hex, choices must be made. And so that was rubbing people the wrong way, where they look like they're going, wait a minute, I can't go just east or west. I got to go, or I got to go, I got to go northeast, or I got to go, or northwest. I got to go southwest. I can't just go west, or I can't just go east. Now, in when I'm playing it, is remember, these lines don't exist. These hexes are just, they're just reference. You could, there's a real terrain. In our case, it's a fictional terrain underneath here. And I just look at the hexes as it's just like a quick guide for the cartographer or for the mapper, for the, in our case, the supreme being. So I could just, if I wanted to, I could, I think of the hexes as just this overlay. And if just by chance, the overlay happens to put these things in hexes where they are, you could just take that overlay and just move it up or move it down. It doesn't really matter. It's just they're abstract. They're just kind of there for ease. Knowing that this castle representing Dorlo is here, just because the icon shows it at the bottom of this hex, it doesn't mean it's at the bottom of the hex. We don't know where in this hex, just looking at this map, Dorlo is. Dorlo could be right up on that, western corner or the eastern corner or anywhere in there, right? 30 some odd, if this is a 6 mile hex, 30 some odd square miles and we don't know where Dorlo is in here, only it's in here. By the same token, these lines don't really exist. You could decide whether, if you needed to, these lines separating these hexes is, it's like the end zone in a football game. It's microscopically thin. So the party, you just decide whether the party is just slightly more in one hex or slightly more in the other hex. Not a big deal. But for some people, especially I think when you're moving icons on those hexes and they're player facing, because as a player, I get it. I might say, hey, you know what? I don't want to go nearer to these ruins because that's monsters. I want to stay over here in the farmland. And that's fine. To me, I'm like, okay, great. So you veer slightly north to stay further away. But other people are going to look at that and say, but I don't want to choose. I just want to be in this middle. I want to be on the line. Can I not be on the line? Some people would say, sure, you can, and just futz it. Other people say, no, whatever. So that part, you just got to figure out how, I guess ultimately you just need to feel about how internally and externally you're going to handle that. Whether you're just say, oh, well, they're more here or they're more there, roll die, tell the players, well, do you want to stay closer to the ruins? Or do you want to stay closer to the farmland? However, but it is something that if you are showing the map to players or you're physically using icons, it can throw you. And it is not an unmeaningful difference, because if you're in these two hexes, your encounters and all the numbers you're using your tables are probably going to vary substantially, or, in this case, between, say, cultivated farmland and theoretically strewn ruins. It makes a difference. So it's not nothing which one they choose. You just have to figure out how to do that. And then distance-wise also, because if I'm in this hex, I'm trying to get to 13, that's right there. If that's neighboring. If I'm up here, it's an extra hex travel. So it does make a difference. But you really, ultimately, it's not a game breaker. You just need to decide how you're handling it. Of course, if you're handling it behind the screen, then you can just judge from what the players are saying, try to give them choices that make sense, and then you just, if you need to put them in one or the other, put them in the one that's most appropriate. But I have seen that that's given people troubles. Let's see some other answers here. Raid LC says Primeval Bastion Land playtest just dropped. If I'm looking for stuff to read through on a future screen. Oh, cool. I'll have to check that out, Raid LC. And then Raid LC says, when we did Forbidden Lands, we had player-facing map with just a few close places of interest, but otherwise empty except for geography. And then also players fill in as we go, but some, and that they're thinking, including me, don't use a player map or players make their own map. Yep, I will sometimes give the players kind of a starter map fragment, but yes, ultimately I leave it up to the players, much like in a dungeon. Map it or not, however you see fit. For the players, I think that unless they're spending real energy, like hiring surveyors and spending months putting out maps, they're only going to have estimates anyway. And I think that I haven't had my players have a hard time figuring out kind of where they are in terms of mostly kind of sub-hex travel at this point for my party, but doing that. And then they can always look for more maps, try to go find it. Yeah, I try to turn the players back into kind of in fiction kind of gaming stuff. Oh, we don't have a map. Game Master, can you make us a map? No, I can't. But you can try to find a map. You can try to find a map maker. You try to find a cartographer, and then they try to put it on them and think about, well, if I'm an adventurer in a town, where might I find a better map? Maybe I gotta find a map maker. Are there any map makers? No. Well, the local lord probably has a map. Yep. How do I get the local lord to let us copy their map? Well, I don't know. It's probably gonna take some doing. All right. Well, then we figure out how to do it. So I try to get that stuff. Like, I try to keep bending them back into the story and not into, give us another prop, Monsieur le DM. But that's kind of my approach, and it works for me, I guess. No one's complained about it yet. No, I've had no one storm off in protest. But for you, it might not be. People may. I know some folks are very used to the tools they have and the things that they allow, and so asking them to go do something different might get protests started. So of course, as usual, amend whatever I'm saying to fit your particular group and situation. Bob Mossel says their advice would be to have lots of names of points of interest so players have locations to act on. Yeah, it's good to have stuff. I mean, you can do that through the map, which I think is actually a great way of doing it. You can also do it through your rumors in town, but you definitely want to have some stuff at the ready, especially at the beginning. It's good to have a handful. I like to think of a handful of different sorts of things. So, because you might get a party that maybe they're afraid of dungeon crawling. They don't want to explore a dungeon. So if you put 5 dungeons out there, you're not doing them any favors in terms of if the players are not ready for a dungeon. But if you give them one dungeon, like in my case on this map, I gave my party at one point that they earned in that last thing. I think I had one sort of ruins in a forest, kind of, and I think I had noted there was some kind of religious center that was in a forest, kind of sort of Mayan Aztec pyramid sort of influence, but it was kind of marked off as this is some kind of religious place. I had that cave of treasures, so that was a dungeon. I had a potential ruined city that was on an island up this river. They were on the coast, and kind of in the coast there was a river, and if they went into the river, kind of went upstream, there was that lost city. So I kind of thought, like, well, I got this kind of sort of urban ruins sort of thing, a religious kind of thing in the wood. And I also tried to do I had some different environments in there. Okay, so you have something in the hills, something in a forest, you have something on this island in a river. So they had some choices in terms of what they wanted to do. Ooh, I want to do dungeons. Okay, there's a dungeon. Oh, I want this, seems more interesting, and we're outside. It's more kind of wildernessy potentially. Okay, we can do that. Ooh, I want to do some kind of urban crawl kind of thing. Oh, we can do that. And then, ooh, I like forest more. I'm more intrigued by forest, or I'm more intrigued by hills, or I want to do more river faring kind of thing. We could do that. So I think coming up with a mix of things gives the party, it gives them choices, but each choice is kind of distinct. So you're not in that analysis paralysis of, great, there's 5 dungeons and I don't really have any way of knowing what. I mean, the other thing you can do, or the additional thing you can do, is try to give some details about if it's known. This cave is full of kobolds. I think there's a dragon in this hole in the ground. And this swamps are, lizard people. Party could probably make a pretty good idea of the players and going, okay, dragon's going to be probably beyond us. We're going to leave that alone. Kobolds, they're our speed, but they're tricksy. And lizard folk, maybe someone goes, I happen to speak lizard. All right, so maybe the lizard folk makes sense. Or someone says, I speak kobold. That makes sense. Or, hey, kobolds are our speed. Lizard folk seem a little bit tough. And dragons seem over our heads, so we can go for the kobold. So all this stuff, you're trying to give them a bunch of information that makes the locations distinct and gives them some sense of what they can expect if they go out there. Of course, in terms of what is known or rumored. Not expecting you to give away the farm on the secret inside the kobold's dungeon is this. No, but you want to give them something that so they can make some kind of informed decision, right? Something that they can hang their hats on and say, yes, we have enough to at least make a initial conclusion and then do that. Did that answer the question, Gashrin? Hopefully it did. Any other questions? I only got one, a whole hour, and I read 2 articles and answered some questions. Not that I mind answering questions, but... And my search for Barbarians of Lemuria does not appear to be fruitful. Getting the phone book of fonts. Well, wait a minute. Oh, wait, did I pass it? Yeah, I'm just getting tons of fonts. No, now I'm into JavaScript files. Wait. Ooh. All right. I think is it here? All right. I have to download it from my iCloud. Is it going to do it? Or is it going to taunt me? Hold on, let's see. Stop. Open file location. Oh, it's calculating. Okay, I have legendary and I have mythic. Is mythic here? All right, let's see. I'll give this a minute. If I can get it. I don't know what's the more fancy one? Barbarians of Lemuria mythic or Barbarians of Lemuria legendary? I'm not sure. Come on, I only got a few minutes. Oh, saying it's can't find it. Try it again. Please. All right, I'll give this another. I don't know. Is something going on? I mean, obviously I'm streaming, so I gotta have pretty good internet. Why are you not connecting to that folder to allow me to download this thing? Probably what I'll do is I'll do it on another. I'll probably just have to do it another day. So I'll make a note of this. I don't want to just keep folks because I know it's riveting streaming watching me watching something you can't see, and it doesn't look like this is going to go. And I've already hit an hour. Hopefully those two. I thought those 2 articles were pretty cool. Thanks, Gashrin, for the question. For the rest of the week, I'm not sure. I'm sort of been trying to mine things for different hex crawling and dungeon crawling for that matter topics. So if you have any ideas for stuff you'd like me to talk about or just that I haven't thought of, because goodness knows I haven't thought of everything, let me know, and then I'm happy to discuss. Can I download this? No, it's not. Doesn't seem like it's going to let me do it. All right, well, I'll have to figure out why that's not letting me do what I want to do later. Oh, Gashman's got another one. All right. Let's see. How the play of the travel between the hexes goes. The party has destination. We're going to the Dungeon of Arns, but since they do not necessarily see hexes, how does it go? The DM just describes their travel until they encounter occurs or they reach their destination. All right, actually, that's a good question, too. Thanks again, Gashman. Okay, so generally with hex crawling, and I can actually zoom out because I think I have some. I think I covered some of that earlier on. Let's see. Whoop, where are my notes for that? Okay. So when we talk about hex crawling, generally we're looking at a couple of different things that are important to us or that are in question. One is the idea of exploration, which is related to navigation, which is, okay, there is the Dungeon of Arns. We don't know precisely where the Dungeon of Arns is. Maybe we have a few cryptic details. Maybe we know that it's in the, let's let me go back to that. Go back to this map. We're in Mewin. We know I don't have a name for this. Let's just call this the Dungeon of Arns is down here, 22.19. Okay, so the party's in Mewin. They get this plot quest hook. Hey, we heard someone found this entrance in the side of a cave. It doesn't look like a natural, or sorry, an entrance inside of a hill. Looks to be carved explicitly, not a natural cave. There was some kind of rusty portcullis that barred the entrance. The person ran away screaming or whatever. So, okay. And the party goes, ooh, that sounds really interesting. And they say, oh, and carved above the entrance was the word Arns. Party goes, great. All right. Party says, Mr. GM or Mrs. GM or Sir, Madam GM, whomever GM. Person GM. We now, the party, we would like to go find this place that had been carved. We were now going to call the Dungeon of Arns. And the GM goes, great. And now the party goes and says, wow, well, goes to the same person. Well, where is it? And this person goes, well, I didn't see it myself. Whoops. I didn't see it myself. I know it was in the Mule Forest. I know it was in the part of the forest that's a hilly part of the forest. So that would be the northeastern. No, it's in the northeastern part where the Mule Forest meets the Red Mountains. Great. So we know we're in Mewin. We know that the northeastern edge of the Mule Forest, where it starts to rise into the Red Mountains, is in the northeastern part of the forest, which is southeast roughly from us. Awesome. Prepare our men. So maybe we know, okay, we think we can generally gauge it out. They'll say, you know what, it'll take us to the edge of the forest, depending on if they go to here. Maybe they can gauge that out and say, yeah, it's estimated. We'll call it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But this is all open plains. So maybe we say you can call it 4 hexes of plains in a day. So you can say, yeah, you can make it to there one day, another day till you get to the, more or less. Say it's about 1 to 2 days. That's what I would say to GM. I'd say, yeah, looking at what you know, what you can visually see, what you know, it's about 1 to 2 days to the Mule Forest if you're going to that area. Okay, great. Now we're in. Now we get to, so the party goes. They get their supplies. We say, well, we might need. Who knows? We might want to have a good time. So we're going to take a week's worth of, or say 2 weeks worth of supplies. We're going to get the wagon. We're going to get the hirelings. We're going to get the whatever. We're going to head it. We're going to head southeast from Mewin, hoping to meet up with the Mule Forest. Great. They leave town. I pull up my hex procedures. Depending on what system I'm using, let's say I'm just using BX, I'm going to roll to see if they get lost or they're not going to get lost. In this case, I'm going to look at it and say, well, if they get lost, it's kind of going to be in the detail. They might meander. They're not going to head. There's a river up here, and they know the general idea. They know that the forest is to the southwest or southeast. The Red River is up here. They're not going to go crazy. And you're going to be able to see it, right? We're in 18.16. You're going to be able to get a little bit of a glimpse of the woods, at least these edges of the woods. You can't get too far lost, but you can meander. So I'll roll some dice, say, well, how far are they meandering? And of course, the woods extends for quite a ways. So even though we know their target ultimately is here, they don't know that. So they're just kind of going to meander. So depending on how they're rolling, we're going to just do that. And then we're going to count how long they're moving, their rate. So if they do meander, maybe they end up the first day, they end up at 21:15, and then the next day, they're going to see that the forest is down here, so then maybe they'll start to turn. Maybe they end up 21:18, maybe they end up at 24:17. A whole bunch of different ways they can do that. I'm going to roll dice in terms for encounters, depending on what my schedule is. I usually roll once for the day, once for the night, as you know, depending where they are. So, okay, so they move along those planes. So I'll roll once for the planes during the day, and then I'll roll once for the night, see what turns up. If something, it happens. If nothing, it doesn't happen. Gasherin, your point of if miraculously there's no encounter the whole long journey, then there's no encounter the whole long journey. I do not force it. I just let it run. Hey, there's no encounter. Well, there's no encounter. They got lucky. This is why I always think with hex crawls, you don't try to put a time frame on it and say, well, I'm going to have 2 sessions. And if I'm the GM and I say, ooh, they're preparing to leave me win, that's 2 sessions before they get to Arn. No, because you will inevitably end up where they just zip through it. And then you start trying to put roadblocks in front of them to eat up time. And that's when it turns into a slog. And that's when it turns into, it feels like you're kind of, it gets a railroady kind of feel to it. Because the party's they're gonna pick up on it. They're gonna pick up on that pattern of, oh wait, we move encounter, move encounter, move encounter. Oh, something's not right here. It's going to be apparent. You definitely describe the travel. I will usually break up the travel into describing the terrain and then up to say lunch, like kind of mid break or segments. If I have a morning segment, lunch segment, or sort of noon segment, afternoon segment, evening segment, and I'll narrate. Okay, you do this, and then as you stop for lunch, you're still, in the case of this one, you're starting off in the farmlands. You can see the farms and the homesteads, and then maybe I would say, oh, you get into some open graze, sort of pasture, perhaps, or grazing land, maybe in 1816. And depending on where they go, then you get up in open fields, and I'm narrating it. Maybe there's traces of game, monsters, whatever, depending on what I'm rolling for encounters, what my monster, my wandering encounter list might look like will give me an idea of what's there in the plans. I will narrate all that. Then I maybe say at lunch, or okay, you finish that segment of travel. Here's what the terrain looks to you. And then the party might respond. So if the party is drifting more north, they may realize that and they go, well, wait a minute, we should be heading more south. So now we're going to turn more south. Great. Or, okay, everything seems to be going as well as we planned. Great. And then we go from there. Of course, once they come to this woods, wherever they are, they're still going to need to try to figure out that exploration element. If you turn up on you're in 2417, how do you're exploring that hex? Okay, no, it's not there. Maybe something else is there. Then I might be rolling for, well, what is in this hex? And does it relate to Arns? Does it relate to something else that's going on? All these different things, you start filling in those details as they're coming in, and hopefully over time they start to work their way to Arns, or they end up in other adventures and they never find Arns, and they end up in, for example, oh, they're here. Maybe there was a watchtower that was related to Lomende, and they uncover some deviltry that the Lomendians are figured in. And then all of a sudden they change their tag. Oh my gosh, we found a secret garrison of Lomendian troops here. We better go back and warn Mewin. So Arns is forgotten, and they run back and do something else. As me as the GM, I don't care. To me, it is all good. They go to Arns, then they got Arns. And maybe I've got one level of Arns that I've written up so that when I'm assuming they got there, they would have it. But if they don't, that's fine. I'll save that for later. Maybe Arns will be discovered. Maybe Arns will figure in somewhere else. If they do, then great. But yes, you just describe their in travel until any encounters occur. I will do the camping. I will do the camping thing. Hey, so the one thing I will do is, okay, I've done the day of travel, then camping, they're making their camp, fire, no fire, what are they doing, watches. I'll go through that setup, then the next day, and I'll just do day to day to day to day. This is, for me, this is in this kind of travel that works. I find that works well. If you're doing something where the travel, it's like weeks, like a week at sea, if we're traveling for 6 months and not a couple of days, then I might change that and say, okay, we're going to do segments in a week, say, or some other period of time, depending. But for this level overland travel, that's how I do it. And yeah, you just describe it. Hopefully decision points will come up. I might be rolling for, I'll be rolling for sort of points of interest, interesting things in this. Maybe in 1915, when they enter it, there's a giant termite mound in the distance, and it's there. I've rolled that. Okay, there's a termite layer there, a giant termite layer there. Do they engage with that? Do they not? How does that work? And then, they're discovering stuff, and hopefully they're keeping their eye on the prize. They're trying to make their way down to Arns, but if they don't, they don't. And they go. And that's pretty much it. Now, if they know the way, if there's a road that went from Mewin to Arns, then I don't really need to engage in hex crawling procedures. I could really do more point crawl because they're not going to get lost. If you're on a road, then it's really about the efficiency of travel, which might be avoiding encounters or just your speed or something else. But navigation, that exploration part, isn't a question anymore. It's just, oh, we're following the road. So, for example, they're in Dorlo and they want to get to Lamende, and these are just for our purposes, they're not connected by a road, but they know there's the river there. Well, they follow the river. How lost can you get? Well, we're gonna keep the river in sight. Okay, then you're not getting lost. There's no roll to me, unless some kind of heavy fog. But even then, if you're by the road, even in some kind of heavy fog, you can get close enough to the river to see the river, or have your foot in the river, or fall in the river. And then if you're going the other way in the fog and the river's no longer there, then you know you've gone the wrong way. You just only so far you can go. You can keep the river, the hearing of the river, the flow of the river. If you know the river flows towards Lamende, right? You just really can't get lost. There's still efficiencies of travel, but at this point, if you're doing that, then you're basically point crawling from A, which is Dorlo, to B, which is Lamende. And then I would lean more on those procedures. This is stuff that you can allow your players to use. So for example, your players might not want to go in this open ground here where they could easily or more easily get lost. They might say, from even though it's not really efficient, say, Miwin, I'm gonna just assume that all this farmland means that there is a road. We're gonna take the road from Miwin over to Dorlo. We're gonna follow the Red River to where it gets closest to the Mule Forest, and then we're gonna go in. It's a longer road, yes, but you're gonna get to this area and you're locked in because you should be able to see it. Weather notwithstanding, from these plains over to these hills, forested hills, you're gonna be able to see it, and you can just beeline. And that's a choice that the players get to make. They're basically trading time for more of a sure thing. You can either take the slower road, but that road's going to be more sure, at least up until a point, or you can take no road, quicker, more chances for getting lost. Encounters are going to vary. Some terrains more apt to have nasty stuff show up than others, so you might want to weigh that, and that gives them choices. Gashman says, I'm planning on sending their group on a little exploration to find the ruins. They'll need to find the magic items to defeat their enemy, and I thought Hexcrawl would be best for that. Just wasn't sure about the specifics. As for now, I mostly read about Hexcrawling without any actual experience. Yeah, so if they don't know how to get there, if there's not a road to the ruins, they need to find it, then I would say Hexcrawling is appropriate, but allow them to use their knowledge to simplify or do whatever they can. Like I said, if they have all the time in the world, then maybe it makes sense. If this is your ruins and they're Miwin to go up to the river, hit the river over, come down, easy. They could also go into the forest and go around like that, which is probably the more difficult and a slowest road. They could try that, or they could go over the plains. Maybe there's a partial road here. Maybe you would say that whatever the culture of Arns populated this little hex flower here, and so there is some road or some other things in these hexes. So if they find themselves this way, they'll find more more traces. And then if here, something else. So lean in the hex crawling if exploration, navigation are important. If it's just about getting from A to B, then a point crawl might be more appropriate. And of course, you can combine them, which is this example of them going to the river, heading over the river, is a combination point crawl and hex crawl, because it's essentially a point crawl from Miwin to Dorlo, another point crawl from Dorlo down the river. But then when they leave the river to go down south to find the ruins, then this turns into a hex crawl. So you don't have to pick one or another for everything. You can pick and choose what's most appropriate. And I really like the idea of players being able to, as a party, spend time to do things like, I'm going to create a trail. So we're going to drill down in here, and then we're going to mark out our trail or hack it up, or we're going to spend thousands and thousands of silver to pave our own road to the ruins because we know we're going to go back and forth. They eventually can take that hex crawl and they can eventually narrow it by their efforts and actions, and they can make it into a point crawl. And then maybe they're going to decide to put armed guards along the way and seed villages along the path, and maybe it turns into nothing at all, just your Indiana Jones moving across the map without even any of the issues, any of the obstacles of a point crawl, because they have just settled it and mollified it to an extreme. All right, folks. Well, ended up going over overtime, but that is good. I'm glad, Gashman. Thanks for the questions. It's Would have been horrible to go through a Q&A type thing and have no questions. Folks, if you could give a thumbs up on your way out, that'd be awesome. And if you came in late, which I think some people did, just zip back to the beginning. You can check out a couple articles I read through and discussed. One was about faction play. The other was about mass combat, which I think are both at least Hexcrawl adjacent topics. And then Gashron was kind enough to add in some questions that we'll cover. I do this pretty much every day, some variation on this. So if you like this kind of thing, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day or night whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I'll talk to you later.